Hey, this is the continuation of my free lab guide for Sentinel, following the public guide from Microsoft, as you can find in the description of this video. This is video 3, and we'll have more coming as well. If you have not caught up with the previous videos, I have the list in the description as well. If you do like this video, leave a like, and if you do like this sort of content, subscribe for more. Let's dive in. Okay, the next step from the guide is actually enabling analytics rules. Now, as I stated before, part of the components and configuration of Sentinel includes onboarding your source and then onboarding analytics rules on top of those sources to find and raise alerts for you. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Where we do that, under configuration, we have analytics rules. Let's head over to analytics. And according to the guide, what we're trying to find here is one of the rule templates. So under active rules, by the way, just an overview of analytics. Under active rules, we have all the active queries that are being run against different sources of our environment. These sources are running into different tables of our log analytics workspace, and then they're raising specific incidents, right? So each analytic rule will have a specific goal in mind when you're setting it up. Each of them might have different rule frequency and even thresholds, for example. What we're going to do now is look into the rule templates. Under rule templates, that's where we can see all the analytics rules that come by default with the solution, plus others that have been added alongside the solutions that you've onboarded before. We could also use filters here to find a specific analytics rules. So I'm adding the security events via legacy agent category, then I'm applying that, and then it filters out all different rules that match that particular filter criteria. Once I do choose or find whatever rule I want to configure and install, of course, it's important to oversee the description, the rule description here on the right hand side where my face is at. So this particular rule is going to look for unusual IPs, unusual locations, and even new rules. And it has specific rules here, or specific characteristics, such as you need to allow it 7 days for this alert to be enabled Sentinel to build a profile of normal activity, and so on and so forth. In here it states that it needs security events. It tells me in real time if that particular source is connected or not. I don't have the security events. Either way, I can still create this rule. Let me go ahead and create this particular rule. And then when I'm creating the rule, it's something similar to what we've seen before, or I've ran through before, but essentially this particular analytics rules has this severity that is attached to it. It has the enablement option here, so you can either enable or disable it. Of course, we're going through the creation, so it makes sense to enable it anyway. And then we can run through some of potential options here. This particular rule, I'm just going to save it. And this particular rule doesn't have any queries, so it just uses machine learning behavior. But if we were going through rules that have KQL queries, as you can see here, then we would be able to potentially modify it or just customize it if needed, right? So that's an example of enabling an analytics rules. Ideally, what you would do is potentially look into all the rule templates that are available in your tenant, and you'll have mapped out your environment against threats that are relevant to your environment, and then you can find specific rules that match whatever is relevant to your environment. So you can look for analytics rules that are looking for specific MITRE attack techniques, for example. So if you're using MITRE attack for you to design your threat-informed defense, you can potentially just look for analytics rules that are going to get you covered for specific techniques, for example, and so on and so forth. We also have anomalies, types of analytics rules. Anomalies are essentially leveraging what the solution calls UEBA, and the market calls UEBA as well, User Entity Behavior Analytics. It leverages machine learning to understand what entities and potentially users are involved in alerts and incidents, and then allows you to have better understanding of how that particular entity is behaving in your environment throughout time. As you can see, most of them are enabled by default. I haven't changed anything in here. What this means is that by default, a lot of anomalous information is going to be available for you under the UEBA section of Sentinel. But I digress, right? So let's go back to what the lab is about. An additional feature of Microsoft Sentinel Analytics is the capability for us to create rules from scratch. So if we click on Create here, top left corner, what I'm able to do is create a scheduled query from scratch myself. So if I do have a KQL query that I know works and I've tested before through other means, we could go through that a little later, but through other means, I can create a rule and put in whatever techniques that's covering, whatever severity that should be flagged as, and then I can create a frequency for that rule to run against my log sources. I can also create a near real-time query rule that has specific characteristics to them. So it's not necessarily scheduled, it's near real time. And then we have Microsoft Incident Creation Rule. And that's what the guide proposes that we do. We just leverage the Microsoft Incident Creation Rule. So this particular rule generates an incident based on alerts generated from another Microsoft security service. So when we're integrating Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which we did in Microsoft 365 Defender, it's important that we just customize what kind of alerts we want created or incidents we want created out of these alerts. So in our example, what we want to do is to create an incident security rule here for Defender for Cloud only medium and high alerts. So the rule we're creating is called Defender for Cloud only medium and high alerts. We're enabling it. Naturally, the Microsoft security service that we're leveraging is Defender for Cloud. The filter by severity is going to be custom, right? So we want only to raise essentially incidents for medium and high alerts coming from Defender for Cloud. Now we could trim down to specific alerts coming from this platform, but it's not the point for today. So let's go to automated response. In here, if we wanted, we could leverage Sentinel's SOAR capabilities to automate the response to these alerts, potentially to dismiss them. If I had chosen, for example, lower level severity alerts and I don't want to look at them in Sentinel, for example. Right, so you could think of more complex scenarios like that, utilizing automation rules. But also for high, medium, and high alerts, potentially you could automate in a way that you are sending that to a different ITSM platform or something like that. And with that all done and said, we're just going to save this, and then this analytics rule has been created and it's now under active. So this is the first one there, is the one that we just created. So if I collapse the menu here on the right hand side, I can have more room state to see this custom content that I created there. There you go, another step from the training lab completed. Next one, we're going to review the Fusion rule. So the way Sentinel works is it has different analytics rule types. So looking here at this official document on the kinds of threat detection that Sentinel has, we get a list of the detections that are included or that Sentinel includes. These are the analytics rule types that Sentinel supports. So the first one is Microsoft security kind. So these are templates that are created from Microsoft, from other Microsoft security solutions in real time. The next one is Fusion, right? So some detections are in preview for that particular analytics rule type. And what is Fusion? Microsoft Sentinel uses Fusion correlation engine with its scalable machine learning algorithms to detect advanced multi-stage attacks by correlating many low-fidelity alerts and events across multiple products into high-fidelity and actionable incidents. Fusion is enabled by default. Because the logic is hidden and therefore not customizable, you can only create one rule with this template. The Fusion engine can also correlate alerts produced by scheduled analytics rules with alerts from other systems, producing high-fidelity incidents as a result. But in this document, you have more details on all the other analytics rule types that we have: machine learning, behavioral analytics, threat intelligence, the anomaly types that we ran through the list a little earlier, and of course scheduled and near real time as well. So if you do want to learn more about all of them, I recommend you have a look into this official page here. Going back to Sentinel, what do we need to do in order to create this Fusion rule, or to review the Fusion rule that we have created? First and foremost, let's have a look at rule templates. Let's create a filter for the rule type called Fusion. When I do so, I then get to see all the rule templates that fall under this category. And we can see that we have one Fusion rule template already in use by our platform. So remember, this specific rule type looks at multi-stage, so it looks at multiple tactics and techniques throughout your attack chain or potential attacks against your environment. What I can do is, as I expand the pane here on the right hand side, I can have a description. I have a description of this particular analytics rules. It describes to me what it encompasses and what it contains, and what it's needed for it to be enabled. What's really important from this entire description is this section right here. So to enable these detections, we recommend, so Microsoft recommends the configuration of the following data connectors for best results. Now there's a long list of connectors here that are supported for the Fusion Analytic rule. And as you can see, we have configured some of them, such as Azure Defender, which is Defender for Cloud, and potentially 365 Defender, if you do have that connector available to you. So with that said, we now understand what the Fusion rule is. Okay, so let's head to the next exercise. This one is to create Microsoft Sentinel custom analytics rule. So far we have seen analytics rules using the rule templates and anomalies from this list. But there's another way for us to create analytics rules. And for us to do that, what we have to do is to come to logs. I'm going to skip through the introduction to Log Analytics workspace here. So what this page allows us to do is to query our Log Analytics workspace tables. So on the left-hand side here, the menu, we have the section called Tables. This is where we can see all the different tables that are being fed data from our log sources. Right, so as I expand log management, I can see that I have a table called usage. If I double click on it, you can see that the query is going to be filled in with this table name in here in real time, and I could potentially run it. If there's any data in this table, it's going to return to me the table information. So you can see the table columns here, all the different entries in it, and so on and so forth. So it's useful to know how to query a table so that you can learn what's the structure of that table. What we want to see here is other tables that are potentially available to us. So I remember when I onboarded Microsoft 365 Defender, I created I onboarded all these different tables from Microsoft 365 Defender. So when I query it, I can see all the different results from these particular log sources from Microsoft 365 Defender. So these logs are being streamed straight up from my Microsoft 365 Defender, my XDR, my Defender for Endpoint, in fact, solution into Sentinel. But also I have custom logs. So the custom logs is a very particular section that is available to me because I onboarded that training lab on Marketplace. What I wanted to do and what I could do essentially is query each one of them as well and learn more about what data is contained in them. As you query them and as you pipe instructions through KQL, that's how you are essentially creating your analytics and your incidents visibility. So essentially what we want to do at this stage is to create a valid query to find a specific and suit a specific use case. So for example, according to the documentation, this is the operation that we're going to run in this particular table. Office activity, operation S. Now, under this particular query, we are looking at this distinct operations here under this table. And what we're looking for is this category called new inbox rule, right? This is particularly what we're looking at. So from here, there are a couple options that we can take. So we can either generate an entire KQL query from here and kick off an analytics new alert rule right from here. So at the top here, we have the new alert rule option, which we could click on create Microsoft Sentinel alert. That's gonna take me to the analytics rule creation page. So that's just a shortcut to the same page that we were just a few minutes ago within the creation of analytics rules. So what we want to do, in fact, according to the guide here, is to create a very specific analytic rules called malicious inbox rule custom. Now, under tactics, I want to choose persistence and defense evasion. And the severity, I want it to be medium. And then we're going to go to the rule logic. Now, under rule logic, the lab provides us with a specific query that we want to provide to this particular rule. So this here is the secret sauce of your SOC operations, right? Because your engineers and your security engineering team will have come up with these very complex queries to determine specific use cases for this particular rule. And what we can do before we move on with the rule creation is testing or simulate results for this particular query. So let me test, click on the test result data here, and it's gonna simulate the creation of this or the running of this particular query against my logs in my environment, and it's gonna tell me how many alerts I should expect on my environment based on the current log set that I have. According to it, I should get about 1 alert per day based on this particular query. So the next step after we validate that this is going to generate some alerts is to head down to alert enrichment. And we can manually map entities to this particular rule, right? So according to the guide, this is this settings that we need to add. So you can just add manual entities in here and then enter specific fields in here as per described in the guide. So this particular query is gonna list out account names, host names, and IP addresses for us whenever there are alerts coming in from it. The next step is, for this particular rule, in this example, what is being asked of us is to actually customize the alert name with dynamic data coming in from the query. So what we want to do is to customize the alert details name format so that it includes the name of the user ID which is being alerted in this incident. So what we can do is in the alert name format, we can actually state the name of the alert in here, but also include this dynamic setting here for the user information to be included in it. So the next step is for us to look at query scheduling. Query scheduling is the characteristics of how often this rule will run against your environment. So for this particular one, we can set it to 5 minutes and then the lookup data from the last few hours. And then we can set up hours or days or minutes, right? So we can set up a time frame for when we should look into the data. So every 5 minutes, we're gonna look into the last one day, for example. For the past day, we're gonna run this every 5 minutes. So this may need to be tweaked and optimized for your production environment. Next, let's head over to incident settings. And at this point, what we want to do is to create incidents from alerts triggered by this analytics rule. Yes, that's what we want to do. What we also want to do is to group alerts. So we want to enable the grouping of related alerts. So this setting enables us to aggregate multiple alerts related to this query results into one single incident to help our analysts investigate all of them through one incident and not have to go through different alerts at once, right? So you reduce the burden on your SOC teams and analysts by grouping these alerts in there. And at this stage, we can also state what's the time window that I want to look for similar alerts to group them in here. So we can set this to 1 day, 12 hours, or so on and so forth. So if there is a number of related alerts created under this time frame of 12 hours, they're going to be grouped into the same incident. Next, let's go to automated response, and there is no automated response that we need to set up at this stage. So we're just going to validate and create the rule. There you go. So the analytics rule was created. And I'm taking back to the logs section because that's where I originally was when I initially kicked off that process. But much like what I did, what you could have done is just come into analytics and manually set the create button here to scheduled query rule. Okay, the next step is for us to review the creation of incidents based on that analytics rules that we just created. So if I head over to my incidents page under threat management, I can see all somewhat created alerts into my open queue. The one here at the top, as I resize the column here, you can see that it's called malicious inbox rule affected by this particular user. So you can see that the custom and dynamic alert name rule that we created in fact works because the user information is just contained right in here in the alert name. What we can also see on the right hand side as we click that alert is a summary of related entities and evidence based on it. Now notice here the entities. We have the user account, we have the host name information, and we have the IP address. So all of these entities, remember, we manually created them when we were creating that particular query alert. Now, if I click on view full details, that's when I can see everything in this alert, right? I can see the timeline. That's how you should first investigate and start your investigation. So a timeline of the alerts that were generated that triggered this incident rule. Right, so look at the timeline, start understanding where things kicked off, what was the trigger for that particular incident, and then start understanding entities. Multiple ways for us to investigate the entities here. Generally, we're just looking at the entities page here, and you can click on them and then understand from an entity's perspective some information from each one of them, such as the host name here, if there's any Defender for Cloud related or Defender for Endpoint related alerts in there, and even IP addresses as well, where the IP address comes from, and from a user perspective, since we're gathering user identity information from some of our services, we can get some of that information. If we have more data sources, more log sources, we're going to have more information populated in here as well. So with all this said and done, this was the module 3, creation of analytics rules in Sentinel. All right, so this was the module 3 of the guide. In the next video, I'm going to go through module 4. Thanks for watching, and as always, leave a like if you do like, if you dislike. Also leave a comment if you dislike so that I know where to improve. And also subscribe if you do like this sort of content. Thank you, and see you next time.